3 a.m. on March 8, 2026. A black Jaguar left Kensington Palace in almost complete silence. There was no royal insignia, no escort, and no official announcement. The person inside the car was not a member of the royal family. According to sources familiar with the internal governance system, it was the Director of Archives of the Crown Estate, the body that holds the most sensitive financial records related to the assets and interests of the British monarchy. Only a few hours after the car departed, a small but noticeable change began to appear within the organizational system of Royal Ascot, one of the most prestigious social events in Britain. The names of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie suddenly disappeared from the official guest list. There was no public announcement. There was no explanation. But people working behind the scenes quickly realized that this was not a system error or a scheduling mistake. At the same time, two other details quietly unfolded. The security passes of the two princesses for several areas within the royal palace system were temporarily deactivated. The wardrobe consultation sessions for Royal Ascot that had already been scheduled in advance were also cancelled. These changes may have seemed minor, but within the tightly controlled ceremonial structure of the royal family, they carried a very clear meaning. Many observers began to ask whether this could be a sign of a power adjustment within the royal family. As King Charles continues his effort to reshape the image of the monarchy toward greater discipline and transparency, some sources believe the message this time was unusually direct. The era of family protection may have come to an end. That raises a larger question for the public. Is King Charles protecting the long-term reputation of the monarchy, or is he going too far by applying strict standards even to his own nieces? If you support this firm approach, comment 1. If you believe this decision is too harsh, comment 2 so we can continue analyzing in the next section. Within the ceremonial system of the British royal family, Royal Ascot is not simply a horse racing event. It is a logistical structure organized with precision down to the smallest detail. The guest list, the seating positions in the royal enclosure, wardrobe consultations, security passes, and movement routes are all planned many weeks before the event takes place. So when unusual changes appeared just a few days before Royal Ascot 2026, many people inside the organizing apparatus immediately realized that these were not ordinary adjustments. The first sign appeared in the security control system. Several staff members responsible for the entrance to the royal enclosure reported that the access profiles of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie suddenly showed a status of temporary confirmation pause. Under normal procedures, these profiles are locked very early because they involve members of the royal family. Changing the access status so close to the date of the event is something that almost never happens. Then came the issue of seating positions. At Royal Ascot, the seating plan of the royal area is strictly controlled. The position of each member is determined based on the line of succession, official role, and public appearance schedule. However, logistical staff reported that the seating chart in the royal enclosure had been modified at the last minute. Two positions that had been marked for Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie were suddenly removed from the allocation plan. Instead, the area was adjusted to accommodate other guests connected to royal charities and partner organizations. Another detail that attracted particular attention among members of the organizing system involved the wardrobe management system. Under traditional procedures, every royal family member attending Royal Ascot has a dedicated wardrobe profile. This profile includes hat sketches, clothing designs, accessories, and work schedules with designers. These files are normally prepared very early, sometimes months before the event, but exactly 144 hours before the opening day of Royal Ascot this year. All wardrobe files related to the two York princesses were suddenly moved into long-term archive status. In the internal language of the system, this means the files have been closed and are no longer part of the operational plan of the event. One logistical staff member revealed that this action is only used when an important guest completely withdraws from the program. What is notable is that all of these changes took place in silence. There was no official announcement from Buckingham Palace or from the Royal Ascot organizers. However, for people who have worked for years within the royal ceremonial system, this sequence of signals created a fairly clear picture. Decisions involving members of the royal family are rarely carried out in isolated steps. They usually reflect a directive from a higher level. Some analysts believe these unusual logistical measures are part of the process of restructuring the royal image under the reign of King Charles. After many consecutive years of controversies surrounding the York branch of the family, pressure for internal reform has continued to grow. In that context, adjusting the presence of certain members at symbolic events, such as Royal Ascot, may be seen as a subtle political signal, but the larger question still remains, without a clear explanation. Why was this decision made at this particular moment? Why did the changes happen so quickly and so decisively? To understand the coldness of the present, we must turn the clock back to the past, because what is unfolding today may not be a sudden decision, but the result of tensions that have been quietly building within the royal family for many years. To understand why the changes at Royal Ascot happened so quickly and so decisively, many observers believe it is necessary to return to one of the largest reputation crises the British royal family has faced in the 21st century. That crisis involved Prince Andrew and the American businessman Jeffrey Epstein. The episode did not only shake Andrew's personal standing, it also left a shadow that lingered for years over the entire York branch of the family. After the controversial interview with the BBC in 2019, public pressure on Prince Andrew increased rapidly. Social connections that had previously attracted little attention suddenly became the focus of investigations by international media. In the end, Andrew was forced to withdraw from all official royal duties. His military titles and many ceremonial privileges were also removed. On the surface, the crisis appeared to have been contained after Andrew reached a civil settlement in the lawsuit filed in the United States. However, for experts in reputation management, the problem did not end there. A major scandal rarely disappears completely. It usually shifts into another form that is more subtle and more difficult to control. In the case of the York family, many media analysts believe the situation evolved from a legal crisis into a prolonged reputation risk. The concept of reputation risk is widely used in large organizations. It does not necessarily involve direct criminal conduct. Instead, it reflects the possibility that an individual or institution may be linked to networks, funding sources, or relationships that could damage its public image. For a modern monarchy that depends heavily on public trust, this type of risk is especially sensitive. In the years following Andrew's scandal, media attention gradually began to shift toward the business activities and financial relationships of his two daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. Neither of them is a full-time working member of the royal family. They pursue independent careers in finance, technology, and the arts. In theory, this fits the streamlined monarchy model that King Charles has mentioned many times. But the connection between royal status and private business activities creates a complicated gray area. Some media reports in recent years have begun raising questions about networks of investment companies, technology funds, and intermediary businesses that have indirect connections to projects involving the two princesses. These companies have not been accused of criminal conduct. However, overlapping ownership structures, combined with the participation of numerous international investors, make financial flows more difficult to track. For risk management specialists, the issue is not about proving legal wrongdoing. What concerns them is the way the public might interpret these connections. When a member of the royal family appears in investment projects with complex structures, any suspicion regarding the origin of funds can quickly become a major media story. Some analysts call this the reputation contamination effect. Even without direct misconduct, Association with financial networks that lack transparency can still create a negative impression. In the modern media environment, where stories spread at extraordinary speed, perception can sometimes be more powerful than evidence. That is why many royal communications advisors have increasingly focused on the concept of perception risk. This type of risk does not depend on court rulings. It depends on public perception. If the public believes that a member of the royal family might be influenced by questionable financial interests, the image of the entire institution could be affected. Within this context, the York branch of the family has become a complicated challenge for the reign of King Charles. On one hand, Beatrice and Eugenie remain the king's nieces and hold a place within the family. On the other hand, any controversy involving the business networks surrounding them carries the risk of reviving memories of Prince Andrew's scandal. Some crisis management experts believe it is precisely the combination of Andrew's past and the complex business activities of the next generation that makes the issue more sensitive. There are no new criminal accusations. There is no official legal investigation. But the risk to reputation remains present, spreading slowly like an oil stain. In the current political and media environment, where transparency is emphasized more than ever, large institutions often choose to act before a crisis fully erupts. This approach is particularly relevant for the British monarchy, where the reputation of the institution is often considered its most valuable asset. For that reason, adjustments in ceremonial protocol and public events can be interpreted as early risk control measures. Reducing the presence of certain figures at symbolic events, such as Royal Ascot, may help limit media attention on sensitive questions. However, when such decisions begin appearing repeatedly, suspicion among observers also begins to grow. Questions about the origin of these internal directives start to emerge. Who is driving these changes? And what is the true objective behind this process of adjustment? Suspicion began spreading like a slow-moving oil stain, and it eventually forced the heir to the throne, Prince William, to take action. The concerns about reputation risks surrounding the York branch did not suddenly appear in 2026. According to several sources familiar with the royal advisory structure, the internal review process had in fact begun in the autumn of 2025. During that period, Prince William was reportedly the first to propose a particularly sensitive step: to conduct a comprehensive ethical review of financial connections that could potentially affect the image of the monarchy. The proposal was not officially described as an investigation. In internal documents, it was presented using a more cautious term: internal review. The stated objective was relatively simple. The advisory team wanted to evaluate the level of reputation risk connected to business and investment networks linked to individuals who still hold royal titles but no longer serve as full-time working members of the royal family. In principle, this was a reasonable step in the context of King Charles promoting a streamlined model of the monarchy. However, in practice, the review quickly became a sensitive subject. The reason was that the York branch of the family continued to maintain its own network of financial and legal advisors, many of whom had worked with Prince Andrew for several decades. According to sources familiar with the process, when the review team began requesting documents related to investment funds and companies connected to projects in which Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie had participated, the initial response from advisors representing the York family was cautious. They did not refuse to cooperate. However, many files were delivered later than expected, and some documents had to be requested several times before they were provided. In the language of organizational audits, this phenomenon is often described as technical delay. It is not a direct act of resistance, but it can significantly prolong the review process, especially when financial structures involve multiple legal jurisdictions. While analyzing the documents that had been submitted, the risk management specialists began to notice an important detail. Some investments involving companies connected to the two princesses were not simple standalone businesses. Instead, they were organized through multi-layer investment structures that included intermediary funds, holding companies, and financial vehicles located in different countries. Structures of this type are not always illegal. In the global financial world, the use of intermediary companies in jurisdictions with flexible tax systems is quite common. However, from the perspective of reputation management for a monarchy, such complexity can create image risk if these connections are misunderstood or exploited by the media. According to an internal summary mentioned by several sources, the review identified approximately 32 complex investment structures that had indirect links to business networks that once existed around Prince Andrew in the past. The important point is that these structures were not described as evidence of wrongdoing. Instead, they were evaluated in terms of their potential to create perception risk in the eyes of the public. Some of these structures were linked to technology and real estate investment funds operating in jurisdictions often described as tax havens. In the risk analysis report, specialists emphasized that the appearance of royal family members within complex investment networks could lead to difficult questions from the media. It is notable that Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie themselves were not accused of participating in any unlawful activity. Most of their professional work was described as legitimate and consistent with the role of individuals pursuing independent careers outside the royal household. However, the issue highlighted by the review team lay elsewhere. In the modern media environment, the boundary between legal legitimacy and public acceptance does not always coincide. For that reason, the internal report began to raise a strategic question. If these complex financial connections continue to exist and one day become the subject of international journalistic investigation, would the royal family be prepared to face another wave of controversy? According to several sources within royal watching circles, Prince William was closely monitoring the progress of this review. As the future heir to the throne, he has a direct interest in ensuring that the image of the monarchy is not further affected by financial controversies carried over from the previous generation. During internal discussions, William's position was reportedly quite clear. Even if no legal wrongdoing exists, any factor capable of damaging public trust should be addressed early. This is not simply the problem of one individual or one branch of the family. It is a matter that concerns the entire institution. However, while the gentlemen within the advisory apparatus were still considering the appropriate political and ceremonial options, another figure within the royal family was said to be following the process with particular attention. That figure was Princess Anne. Long known for a disciplined and direct working style rarely seen within royal circles. According to some sources, in the final phase of the internal review, it was Princess Anne who first held the final consolidated report in her hands. And while the gentlemen were still weighing their next steps, the most iron-willed woman in the royal family read each page of the document as if it were an indictment of the entire situation. As the internal review entered its final stage, all analyses, data tables, and risk assessments were compiled into a complete file. In the administrative language of the royal household, this document is often described as a dossier, meaning a comprehensive file that contains the full strategic evaluation of a sensitive issue. According to many sources familiar with the advisory process of the royal family, Princess Anne herself was responsible for delivering this file directly to King Charles. Princess Anne's role within the royal institution has long been considered unique. She is not only the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, she is also widely viewed by many observers as one of the most disciplined and pragmatic members of the family. For decades, Anne has rarely participated in media controversies. Yet in internal matters related to the responsibilities of the monarchy, she has often been regarded as a direct and uncompromising voice. According to information cited by royal analysts, the file Anne presented to the king was not a criminal accusation. Its contents focused primarily on the assessment of reputation risk. The report summarized the entire review process that began in the autumn of 2025, including indirect financial connections, complex investment structures, and the possibility that these details could one day become the subject of media investigations. One of the most important elements of the file lay in the conclusion reached by the risk management specialists. The report clearly stated that there was no evidence indicating that Princess Beatrice or Princess Eugenie had participated in criminal conduct. Most of their professional activities were legitimate and consistent with the status of individuals pursuing independent careers outside the royal household. However, the report also emphasized that the existence of numerous complex investment structures connected to networks previously associated with Prince Andrew created an environment that could easily be misunderstood by the public. For a political institution such as the British monarchy, public perception carries particular significance. The royal family operates not only on the basis of law, but also on the foundation of social trust. Once the image of the institution becomes questioned, restoring that trust often takes many years. That is precisely why the internal report placed strong emphasis on the concept of perception risk. According to sources close to royal observers, the discussion between Princess Anne and King Charles centered on a fundamental question. Should the royal family continue accepting a certain level of reputation risk in order to preserve family unity? Or should it prioritize the long-term safety of the institution's public image? This was not a simple decision. For King Charles, the issue also carried deep personal meaning. Beatrice and Eugenie are not only public figures. They are the daughters of his younger brother, nieces he has known since they were children. On many family occasions in the past, Charles was seen showing warmth and closeness toward both sisters. For that reason, considering measures that might limit their public presence was not only a political decision, it was also an emotional challenge. Some royal analysts believe this was the moment that most clearly revealed the difference between Charles's two roles. On one hand, he is the head of the family. On the other hand, he is the monarch, the person responsible for protecting the reputation of the entire monarchy. These two roles do not always fully align. According to information cited by several sources, the final conclusion of the dossier was quite clear. There was no evidence of direct criminal conduct involving the two princesses. However, the complexity of the financial connections and the possibility that these stories could be interpreted negatively in the future were considered risks too large to ignore. In a context where the British royal family has experienced multiple media crises over the past 2 decades, taking early action to reduce potential threats is often seen as the safer strategy. Reputation management specialists frequently describe this approach as the principle of early prevention. Instead of waiting for a scandal to erupt and then reacting, an institution adjusts its structure and the public presence of certain individuals before a story grows beyond control. From that perspective, the king's final decision gradually took shape. It was not based on a legal verdict. It was based on a strategic calculation about the long-term image of the monarchy. If any factor existed that could revive new suspicions surrounding the York branch of the family, reducing their visibility at symbolic public events could be considered the most reasonable measure. According to many observers, the adjustments at Royal Ascot were only the first visible expression of that decision. They sent a relatively clear message that the reign of King Charles was applying new standards to the management of the royal family's public image. The decision had been made. Yet for those responsible for planning the future strategy of the monarchy, another question immediately followed. If controversies from the past could create such serious reputation risks, how could similar situations be prevented in the future? From that line of thinking, a new step began to be discussed within the royal household. A new set of rules, stricter regarding financial relationships and business activities of individuals who carry royal titles, was gradually taking shape. After the strategic decision was reached, an important question quickly emerged in internal royal discussions. If reputation risk could arise from complex financial relationships or from outside activities of individuals who carry royal titles, then how should a clear framework of rules be established for the future? In that context, a proposal was said to have emerged from the office of Prince William. The proposal aimed to create a new ethical code for individuals who maintain an official connection to the monarchy. According to several sources within royal watching circles, this set of principles is known internally as the Royal Standard Conduct Protocol. Although it has not been publicly announced as a formal document, many experts believe it could become a kind of new ethical constitution for the monarchy in the modern era. The goal of the protocol is not to control the private lives of individual members. Its purpose is to establish a clear framework that protects the shared image of the institution from the risks of the 21st century. Analysis of summaries mentioned by several sources suggests that the protocol is built on three main pillars. The first pillar is financial transparency at a level approaching total openness. In previous decades, members of the royal family were not always required to disclose detailed information about personal investments, especially when they were not serving as full-time working members of the monarchy. However, recent controversies have begun to change this perspective. Under the proposed framework, any individual who carries a royal title and appears at official events would be required to declare major business connections and significant investments. Financial advisors associated with the royal household would have the authority to review complex investment structures in order to assess potential reputation risks. The goal of this rule is not to prohibit business activity. The aim is to ensure that financial flows connected to individuals with royal titles do not create suspicion in the eyes of the public. The second pillar of the Royal Standard Conduct Protocol focuses on association with individuals or organizations under investigation. In the global business American environment, it is normal for investors to cooperate with many international partners. However, for the royal family, any connection with an individual involved in a criminal investigation or financial scandal could create a serious media crisis. For that reason, the new protocol is said to establish a clear principle. Individuals who carry royal titles should avoid participating in projects or business networks linked to people who are under investigation by law enforcement authorities, even when the connection is indirect through intermediary funds or holding companies. Risk management advisors would still have the authority to recommend withdrawal in order to protect the image of the institution. The third pillar of the protocol relates to political neutrality. This has long been a traditional principle of the British monarchy. However, in the era of social media and global advocacy campaigns, the boundary between social activism and political activity can sometimes become blurred. Some advisors believe that when a member of the royal family expresses strong views on policy issues, it can unintentionally draw the monarchy into political controversy. For that reason, the Royal Standard Conduct Protocol emphasizes that royal family members should exercise caution when participating in public campaigns or cooperating with organizations that pursue political objectives. They may continue supporting charitable and social initiatives, but they should avoid campaigns that could be interpreted as support for a specific policy agenda. Beyond these three main pillars, another notable feature of the new protocol lies in its enforcement mechanism. According to internal summaries referenced by several sources, the disciplinary system is designed with several levels. At the lightest level, the individual involved may receive an internal warning and be required to adjust certain business relationships or public activities. If the reputation risk is considered more serious, additional measures may include restricting participation in royal events or reducing appearances in official programs. In cases considered to cause significant damage to the image of the institution, advisors may even recommend the removal of certain honorary titles or ceremonial privileges. For many analysts, the establishment of a clear disciplinary mechanism marks a significant shift in the way the royal family manages its image. In the past, many issues were often handled in a flexible way and depended on family circumstances. But in the current global media environment, that approach has become increasingly difficult to maintain. A clear set of rules helps the royal family respond more quickly to potential risks. More importantly, the Royal Standard Conduct Protocol also reflects a new philosophy of governance. Instead of waiting for a crisis to occur and then trying to control it, the advisory structure of the monarchy is shifting toward a preventive model. Every financial, social, and media connection of individuals who carry royal titles is evaluated from the perspective of long-term risk to the image of the monarchy. However, even the most detailed rulebook still needs a symbolic moment to send its message to the public. The British royal family has long understood the power of ceremony and image. Major changes are often expressed through events that carry traditional meaning. And in the year 2026, the stage chosen to signal a new era of royal governance appeared to be very clear. Not a press conference at the palace, and not a dry legal document. It was the green lawn of Royal Ascot in the year 2026. Royal Ascot has long been more than a sporting event. Within the symbolic structure of the British monarchy, it also functions as a ceremonial stage where the public observes how the royal family presents itself before the nation. For that reason, details that may appear small in the guest list or in the order of appearance sometimes carry political and symbolic meaning far greater than the event itself. Royal Ascot in the year 2026 took place in such a special context. Many observers noticed a striking change in the overall picture of the royal enclosure. For the first time in many years, the familiar presence of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie no longer appeared in the central area of the event. There was no official announcement explaining this absence. However, for those who closely follow signs of change within the royal household, that empty space carried a clear, symbolic meaning. The absence of the two York sisters happened at the same moment that another image captured public attention. It was the return of Catherine, Princess of Wales. After a long period of medical treatment, in the months before that, her health condition had become a subject of widespread concern not only in Britain but around the world. Therefore, her appearance at a major event such as Royal Ascot was seen as an important signal of recovery and of her future role within the royal structure. Media analysts quickly noticed the striking contrast between these two images. On one side was the empty space created by the absence of the York branch of the family, which for years had been linked to controversies about reputation. On the other side was the steady presence of the next generation in the line of succession, represented by Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. This contrast does not necessarily reflect a personal disciplinary decision against any particular member. Instead, many experts believe it reflects a broader transition in the way the monarchy builds its image before the public. In the streamlined royal model that King Charles has mentioned many times, public presence increasingly focuses on those members who play central roles in the work of the institution. Catherine fits this model particularly well. For more than a decade, she has built an image closely connected with charitable work, education, and public health. Projects related to early childhood development, mental health, and young families have become an important part of her public work. This creates a stable and low-controversy image, something that the royal communications structure values highly in an increasingly demanding media environment. For that reason, Catherine's appearance at Royal Ascot was not simply the return of a royal family member after a period of illness. For many analysts, it also represented a message about the future direction of the monarchy. The modern monarchy no longer relies entirely on bloodline alone. The credibility of the institution is increasingly tied to the concepts of public responsibility and ethical standards. In that context, small changes in the guest list or in the structure of appearances at Royal Ascot can be understood as part of a broader adjustment process. The royal family is gradually defining more clearly the values it wants to represent before the public in the 21st century. And as viewers observed, the scene at Royal Ascot in the year 2026, many began to realize that the story was not only about who appeared or who was absent. The larger story was the symbolic transition taking place at the very center of the British monarchy. When looking back at Royal Ascot in the year 2026, Many observers believe that this event may one day be mentioned in royal historical records for a very different reason from tradition. For centuries, Royal Ascot has been associated with horse racing, fashion, and the social rituals of the British upper class. But in this particular year, its meaning seemed to lie in a deeper change within the structure of the royal family. The absence of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie from the central area of the royal enclosure was seen by many as a sign that the public representative role of the York branch of the family is gradually coming to a close. After many years affected by controversies related to Prince Andrew, the presence of this branch of the family at symbolic events has steadily narrowed. Andrew himself almost no longer appears in public life and is believed to spend most of his time living quietly at Royal Lodge. For the reign of King Charles, this adjustment process carries strategic meaning. For more than a decade, he has repeatedly emphasized his desire to build a more streamlined and transparent model of monarchy. The changes observed at Royal Ascot this year appear to reflect an effort to turn that vision into reality. At the same time, the role of the next generation is becoming increasingly clear. Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, are gradually becoming the center of the royal image before the public. The new ethical protocol discussed internally, along with stricter standards on financial transparency and public responsibility, shows the foundation that the future generation of the monarchy is trying to build. Some analysts describe this process using a powerful image. The British monarchy is performing a form of self-surgery in order to survive in the 21st century. It is a process that may cause discomfort and controversy, but it is considered necessary if the institution wants to maintain public trust in the long term. What do you think about the new protocol that is believed to have been proposed by Prince William? Do you think such strict standards are too harsh for a family? Leave your opinion below. And if you want to continue following stories behind the doors of the royal family, do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next analysis. Thank you for following this journey of uncovering the story. See you again in the next video.